everyone. Welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today is Monday, October 30th, 2023. I'm Simon Rafe, here with my two co-hosts, Brad Eli and Christine Niles. Good to have the old guard back again. It's always nice. Censorship has been an ongoing problem in recent years, whether it be left-wing extremists in big tech or the government colluding with big tech. Online censorship is certainly an issue in this day and age. Now, earlier this month, an international group of 136 academics and journalists from all over the political spectrum put out the Westminster Declaration, warning Joe Biden and his administration that online censorship is undermining free speech. They argue that concerns about misinformation do not justify violating people's liberty, and that the response to so-called bad speech isn't censorship, but more speech, I guess, good speech. This declaration feeds into today's topic, which is how we can deal with online censorship, as in fighting it and, of course, working around it. So, guys, what do you have for us?
The whole corporate censorship, whether it's in the, big tech, online is big corporations, banking and all this, has been really ramping up in the last few years. One of the startling ones for me was when you go back just to May of this year, 19 state AGs wrote a letter to J.P. Morgan Chase, and they said, you need to stop it. And it's like, well, you don't say that unless you want to get sued, or it's very true,
yes,
to be provable. So the opening line in their letter to Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of Chase, says, it's clear that J.P. Morgan Chase has persistently discriminated against certain customers due to their religious and political affiliation. Boom, that was the opening line of their letter. You guys have been doing this, and the whole rest of it, so please stop it. But there's this whole fuzzy line about, well, can the government you can't do it. Yeah. But a corporation has a lot more leeway into what policies they want to look at.
It's interesting. So you have some kinds of services which are deemed by the government to be uncancelable. You're not allowed to refuse this kind of service. For example, your utilities. Your utility company is not allowed to say, I don't like your politics, so you're not going to get water, you're not going to get electricity, you're not going to get gas. Your utility company is there. There are various other things that are deemed to be this, but banking, apparently J.P. Morgan Chase, is not one of them, that people can apparently say, I don't like your politics, therefore don't want to do business with you for banking. And one would sort of think, well, the ability to have money and the ability to store money in a place that isn't under your mattress, the ability to, in today's world to work with money, because who carries cash anymore? Very few people carry cash. You pay everything online, you're doing all this sort of stuff. Well, if you don't have a bank account, how are you supposed to actually do business? Which, of course, is the idea behind these censoring people. They're wanting to drive people out, not just to the marketplace of ideas, but the marketplace itself.
Yeah, and the Westminster Declaration, just returning to that, I think this is a very important document. Many big names have signed their name to it, but there's one paragraph here. They call it the censorship industrial complex, what's taking place, censoring voices on social media. But they say here the censorship industrial complex operates through subtle methods. These include visibility filtering, labeling and manipulation of search engine results, which we at Church Militant have experienced. Through deplatforming and flagging, social media censors have already silenced lawful opinions on topics of national and geopolitical importance. One of them, the Hunter Biden laptop, that was majorly censored a couple years back. They've done so with the full support of so-called disinformation experts and fact checkers in the mainstream media who have abandoned the journalistic values of debate and intellectual inquiry. And one of the most recent examples of that is NewsGuard. Elon Musk has been on Twitter saying you need to completely disband NewsGuard. It is a total scam. NewsGuard is one of those fact checkers, but this is what a lot of people don't know. NewsGuard, the advisor to NewsGuard, is someone named Jimmy Wales. Jimmy Wales is the co-founder of Wikipedia, who some people call it Wokepedia. I've had very bad experiences with Wikipedia. I was trying to edit because it's one of those open source things where anybody can be an editor, and I tried to add some factual information on the Michael Voris Wikipedia page, and they kept taking it off. they kept removing it. And then they finally banned me in favor of language, that we're fringe and far right and all this other stuff. And I'm trying to make it more unbiased. And they just banned me. So these people are completely leftist, completely liberal. The co-founder is the advisor to NewsGuard. And NewsGuard has dinged conservative podcasts, of course, while leaving the leftist ones alone on Twitter. And so this is why everybody's up in arms about this.
For them to ban you, I mean, to be fair, you have been in jail before.
That's true.
And you do have a rap
I am a
sheet.
jailbird.
So if you want to Google that, Christine Niles in jail, probably something's going to come up out there on that. Just saying.
Just saying. I think it happened in Florida. Christine Niles is a Florida woman. That's what happened.
Okay.
But
you might even see a picture of her behind bars out there.
Oh my gosh, terrible.
Yeah.
But look, what you've got with a lot of these cases, of course, is everyone talks about the freedom of speech, one of the 5 freedoms that is guaranteed to people by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And of course, firstly, you have to remember, freedom of speech is a bedrock principle of the American Constitution. It's not necessarily a principle at all in a whole bunch of other constitutions and so forth. But even allowing that, the notion of freedom of speech is the government may not censor you. The government may not infringe upon your speech, but private actors may do so, because the argument is they don't have to provide a platform for your speech, which is okay, well, that's perfectly legitimate. The problem is how are they making these decisions? For example, we, Church Militant, obviously we got a lot of videos on our site, and there are various ways to put videos on the internet. And a lot of the cases, because of economies of scale, you use a third-party service, and that's what they do. They just host videos. And we were using a third-party service called Vimeo, which is a very technically good service. It was inexpensive. It is a excellent product. Here's the problem. We got kicked off Vimeo because they said the Southern Poverty Law Center called us a hate group. And we're like, well, hold up. Where does Southern Poverty Law get their authority to say who and who is not a hate group? What's the basis of this? And their response was pretty much verbatim, Southern Poverty Law Center are the experts in this regard because they're the ones saying it. And it's that sounds somewhat circular there. But yeah, we just got kicked off, which meant that we had to, this happened in early 2020. I think it was just right about the time that the pandemic was hitting and all the lockdowns were happening. So that's what I spent lockdown doing, rebuilding the videos on the site. People may remember that during that period, there were whole videos on the site you couldn't get because we were busy rebuilding them, busily trying to do them. That cost us a lot of money. We are now dealing with, just as a basic cost, every single day, 365 days, every year, 366, if it's a presidential election year, every single day, $1,000 for bandwidth. That's it. That is our bandwidth cost. That's not the cost to keep the lights on. That's not the cost to pay for cameras. That's not the cost to pay for people's salaries. We get coffee for free. Thank you very much, Alcoa. They always give us free coffee, but doesn't include cost for coffee and milk and hot chocolate and tea and everything. Doesn't cost any of that. $1,000 a day just for bandwidth because Vimeo dropped us. This becomes the real cost of this. The idea is to shove you out economically.
Yeah, and when they do, I mean, for us, for video's king. So when they actually go for the jugular on that one, how important. I mean, we're not living in an age where you can just say, well, I don't really need this service or that service. You need many services out there to function in our modern society. Going back to the banking thing in Westminster, NatWest, which is National Westminster Bank, a big high-profile case that just got kicked around recently. Nigel Farage, I just love him to pieces. Okay, he's really wonderful to listen to. In the UK, there he was actually booted from his bank, this NatWest, and just recently on Friday they came out with independent review board said technically what happened with him was lawful, because there's such a wide path with the corporate, entities to go ahead and, to get them, this is almost, the law is not meant for them. It's meant for the government. But it says mistakes in how it reached that decision and also how they handled confidential information, and then also communication with fraud. Well, those were mistakes made there. My goodness, that's the whole case. Yeah. But those were mistakes, and that's the difference between them making mistakes, which are, well, we'll work on this with our HR department or some other board. But is it technically unlawful? No, and that's the rub, really, where and this to me is really crazy because we went through this whole era of bake my cake.
Yes.
and you're forcing all these Christian bakers to make a cake, and they're like, I'm sorry, I disagree with, being part of this homosexual, union or whatever you guys got going on here. Your wedding, and I don't want, I'll come in, I'll serve you a cake, I'll serve you cookies, you can sit in my restaurant and eat all day long, but I don't want to participate in the whole ceremony thing. And everybody and their dog is being taken to court over all that, but it seems like nobody's taking these big corporations to court over similar problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also you said earlier you correctly said that private companies have the right to censor whatever they want because it's a private company. Twitter can censor whatever they want. Facebook, they can have their own rules if they want. The problem comes in is when the federal government uses them and coerces them, and treats them as an arm of the government to censor private accounts. And that's what the whole lawsuit in Missouri v. Biden is about. More than 60 government either agencies or officials are being sued for coercing, pressuring Facebook and Twitter and Google to censor accounts on things like Ukraine, Hunter Biden laptop, vaccines, COVID, election fraud, all sorts of things. I mean, now, the government's saying, we didn't force anyone. We simply wrote them emails expressing concern about this or that. Well, I mean, what are you going to do if you are a private company and the federal agents come knocking on your door and saying, we really don't like this at all? What are you going to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, of course, the entire foundation of modern society is that the government has a monopoly on violence. That is how you do. It's like the government has a monopoly on violence. It is the Pax federal government. That's what it is. And so yes, when somebody comes along and says we'd really like it if you did, it's like, yeah, okay, you're the people with everything, and you're all the people with all of these other abilities to sign contracts, especially when you come with big tech. The government is a huge user of big technology for all kinds of things, just mundane, regular issues of discussing within their departments, within the military and communications, and also within the intelligence services and so forth. They're going to come along and buy services from Facebook, from Apple, from Google. Okay, well, if you don't play ball with them, they are probably not going to play ball with you. And it's very disturbing. And of course, we have been there. You say you can't fight City Hall. I tell you most solemnly, you can fight City Hall. It just costs $500,000 in lawsuits. That's what happened with us in Baltimore. Baltimore, the government of Baltimore colluded with a private organization who held the venue. They managed the venue, and the government of Baltimore said Church Militant should not be allowed to hold their rally. We had to take them to court. We had to do the whole business. You all know this story. We eventually won, but again, $500,000. Because of our very generous donors who are out there watching this, we were able to do that. How about all the other people who get shut down? They don't have our options.
Yeah, and what's scary now, too, is I'm speaking of government coercion and censorship. We have the IRS now knocking on people's doors over content that they're reading, that they're promoting on Facebook. Yeah. So we've got videos of the IRS literally showing up. I think it was the FBI actually showing up to the door of just a pro-lifer. Yeah. And the pro-lifer's like, well, what have I done? Yeah. Like, we just want to talk to you about some post that you had on social media. I mean, that's scary. Yes. That's scary. We didn't see that under Trump. We're seeing this now under Biden, and it's scary.
Yeah, in Baltimore, the fact that the government got involved is where we could make bank on that. What happens though if it's just the vendors? I don't like you. I don't want to do business with you. And okay, so that's where we're at today. Oh yeah, is all these vendors. But then you get the government doing that collusion, but softly. Yeah. And then the Supreme Court recently saying, well, they can keep doing that, contacting, as long as these cases are playing out. So that was a surprise to me. 3 of the Supreme Court justices said, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But the other 6 said, yeah, just keep going ahead with that collusion. And as long as, that to me, once you're at that level where the government can just kind of nudge, what's the other incentives for these big companies to do that? Well, my goodness, they have people working for them, I'm sure, that have either been on Epstein's airplane or have problems with their taxes or, their dog, goes on somebody else's lawn, indiscriminately. So the thing is, they know stuff about other people, and they may even behind the scenes kind of communicate, well, things will be fine if you go this way. And it's really a seedy world. It's a scary world. We shouldn't have to deal with that. But you know what? You have fallen human nature, and you have, a world of fallen human beings in that. So, yeah, and the bottom line, we've said this so many times, the left, if you're in the tank, and who's in charge right now is the leftist, government officials. If you're already in the tank for killing babies, like 3,000 babies a day, I've lost, and I'm only talking about chemical and that's just ones you can document. is there anything else that would be beyond the pale?
There's nothing
You would kill babies to stay in office? Why are we even worried about, the collusion and everything else? As if it's really?
Surprising.
How could you do that?
Well, let's look. We're about halfway through the show, I think. So let's maybe take some more kind of positive things that people can do to address these concerns. Because I think one of the major issues, and you touched on this, Brad, and it said, we've got to have access to a whole bunch of stuff in order to function in today's society. Well, I think there's a lot of people out there, and all of us included. This isn't me saying, hey, look at y'all being terrible. It's all of us. We've become quite lazy in terms of how we engage with stuff. It's like we want to go to one place, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, be it wherever, and just say, okay, what have I got? I want to get everything there. And it's like, well, okay, that's not an option because you're going to a place that's going to be a gatekeeper that are going to guard what you can see. So what we actually need to do as a very positive step is, firstly, people need to be going directly to the sources. This is why, we just had the Vortex today. Mike's talking about it. We've got our new app that we've put out. It's a new, improved app. You can go to the Apple Play Store or the Apple Store or the Google Play Store for your Android phone. You can download the app, and you just search Church Militant, you can download it. Here's the cool thing about it. It sends notifications, and it sends these notifications to your phone. Ding, ding, ding. You get these notifications. You know what's going on. The other thing you can do, if you're not into the whole app world, you can go to our website. Our website has notifications on it. You can set them and they come in on your browser. And you often see these for a lot of other websites. Our website does that. It will send you these notifications. The other thing that you can do, obviously most people who are saying this, you're signed up for our emails, but be signed up for our email newsletter and get our emails, because that is, we just send the emails to you. It's not like via Facebook or via Twitter and all this sort of stuff. So many people come and say, oh, well, you're not on YouTube. Well, I just want you on YouTube. Why aren't you on Roku? Why aren't you on this? It's like, guys, come to us. All of those places will censor you to a greater or lesser extent. All of them come and they will censor you. Even the ones, there's some good ones. I know you're going to talk about some of these good social media sites, Christine, but ultimately these places all have an agenda. They all have an agenda, and they may silence you on certain things if you cross some line. We want to be independent, which means you've got to come independently to us where we are.
Yeah, there are some, like you mentioned, alternative social media sites like Rumble, which is alternative to YouTube. You've also got Truth Social, which is where President Trump is. You've got Gab, Getter, and various other things. And obviously, there's greater free speech on those platforms. The drawback, of course, is that they don't get anywhere near the numbers that Twitter or Facebook or YouTube get. And so, just as a strategic measure, that's fine, if you need to post videos on YouTube just for visibility, but just be aware, like you said, they heavily censor, and it's getting worse too. It's getting a lot worse on YouTube. They're not like easing back on that at all.
I doubt this will be able to be put on YouTube. Everything that we do goes through this sort of assessment of can it go on YouTube, and I've got a feeling that our assessors are going to be like, no, we're done. We're done with this one here.
There was a guy that was on Download a few times, James Mon, and he was in the investment world for many, many years, 30 years, I believe, and he had some pointed suggestions. He has a take on what to do out there, at least in the financial world. So if there's anybody out there who want to take notes about this particular time, it's not just about where can you get your media and that. What should you do with your money ultimately out there? And the first one he has, get into hard assets. So he says, if you have a house that is paid for, I got some extra cash, what do I want to do with it? Leave it sitting in the bank, or do you want to put it into a house? Well, if you can buy the house, we don't have to worry about all the interest and all that. Get a house. Then the bank can't cancel you because it's not under their auspices anymore. So that's one thing, is hard assets. You might buy, say, gold. Who's the guy? Give me the spin
William Devane.
William Devane, he even loves the feel of gold. You always get kind of creepy about that time, right? But the idea that if you have the physical assets somewhere, then say safety deposit box or something like that, I don't know. But anyway, that's yours. That's out of the purview of big tech, corporations, corporate world, corporate banking, and all that type of stuff. It's out of their play, and that would be one thing that he would. And of course, in our day and age with prepping and all that, put a can of beans on the shelf is better than, well, someday I might buy a can of beans or something like that, because that someday your bank might have been hacked and locked up, and who knows if you're going to be able to get anything out of there. So hard assets is king with regard to him. Number two, along that line, is use small local banks. They're typically, I think there's a small Catholic bank local here that is a good one. There's other small banks that aren't the J.P. Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon bank that he can set all the policies for whatsoever. A lot of these small banks are folding up and being absorbed into bigger banks, and that's the problem today. But at the same time, a smaller bank probably won't have all of that commandeering that comes with those.
Or the wokeness kind of
wokeness
thing. Yeah, that's
along that. And along almost a parallel the same line, credit unions, he would say, that even more so are away from that corporate think of ESG scores and the diversity, equity stuff going on that they throw out there, climate and environmentalism. If you're not your social number is not up high enough, you're going to get canceled out of here. That doesn't run up on their radar as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually just highlight another thing from the Westminster Declaration here, where they say time and time again, unpopular opinions and ideas have eventually become conventional wisdom. By labeling certain political or scientific positions as so-called misinformation, our societies risk getting stuck in false paradigms that will rob humanity of hard-earned knowledge and obliterate the possibility of gaining new knowledge. Free speech is our best defense against disinformation. I just wanted to highlight two recent examples of this, where the government and the media came in and called this misinformation, and now we're realizing actually it was completely true, or at least there are many true elements to it. For instance, first one, Hunter Biden laptop. Y'all remember a couple years ago, 3 years ago, in the weeks before the election, the FBI actually contacted Twitter and various other, and basically said, this is, they pre-bunked it before the report ever came out. They knew it was coming out. They knew the New York Post was going to come out with the story, but they contacted Twitter, FBI, and said, no, this is not true, and so Twitter censored the story. They suspended New York Post. They said, we will restore your account if you delete this post. New York Post stuck to their guns. They said, we're not deleting anything because this is completely true, and we're not going to delete anything. And so that went on for 2 weeks. Twitter reversed. Jack Dorsey, actually all of it happened behind his back. It was the lawyer Vijaya Gadde who Elon Musk fired immediately as soon as he came in. But she's the same one who censored Trump on Twitter. And now everybody knows that the Hunter Biden laptop is true. I mean, if you all recall, all of media was saying, this is fake and it's fake news and hacked and blah, blah, blah. And now leftist media is saying, yeah, and he's under criminal investigation for the stuff they're finding on that. Another thing, all the COVID stuff, all the COVID stuff coming out. Again, all of it labeled misinformation. People were banned, suspended for even questioning the vaccine. And now evidence, more and more mounting evidence, and even some big name media is now beginning to recognize that, there might be an increased, chance of in boys, that's proven now, possibly sterility, stillbirths, all sorts of things coming out now that just a couple of years ago the government and media were all saying, no, this is disinformation. And
I think there's a very important thing there when you were talking about, you've got these things that were considered disinformation, now considered mainstream positions. I think there's also, I don't know if the Westminster Declaration touches on this, but if you, especially with Americans, if you come along and you tell Americans this is a thing that cannot be discussed because the government says this thing isn't true, Americans will want to discuss it because Americans are a contrary group of people, and that's why we love them. But it's right there in the DNA of the Republic, right? From Washington on down, it's like, let's be contrary. The problem is, if you come along and say this thing is misinformation, you keep saying this is misinformation, all these things are misinformation, you become the boy who cried wolf. And when you actually come along and you say, guys, this is completely untrue, this is untrue, and it genuinely is untrue, this thing is a lie, you are going to get people who will unquestionably accept it because you have poisoned your ability as the government to communicate with your people. You have poisoned your ability as the media to communicate with the people. And genuinely, so just something come along, Martians have landed, and half the country will believe it because the president is saying, guys, it's not true, there are no Martians. And this becomes a grave danger for the ability of the media and the government to communicate with the people. There needs to be a trust between the people and the media and the government, and with all this censorship, they have utterly destroyed that. And suddenly we're living in a world now where it's like, you don't know what's true. If the government says something, if I see, how do I know Joe Biden is lying? His lips are moving. And that is a terrible thing for me to have to say about the President of the United States. That it's like, I immediately do not believe something that comes from a guy who takes a check from the federal government. That is a problem.
Yeah, the fact that the misinformation is so prevalent out there, and the fact that the government is so in the tank for that, it gets you almost thinking that the mode or reason for them to act is not to convey the truth. It's more propaganda and to motivate you to do one thing or other. I mean, all of the different surveys and polls that came out from all these big wing polling outfits, they're supposed to just be the numbers. And in 2016, and then again in 2020. And they're saying, well, this is where all the polls are saying. You know, New York Times, Trump had, in 2016, at the beginning of the night, had a 97.8% chance of losing. And then that meter just kept going on down, 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 down. And there was this big comeuppance to all the statisticians, all the reporting, all the polling agencies out there, whose bread and butter is out there on polling. So when you are, how you ask the question, who you present it to, and all this type of stuff, you know, there may be some semblance of being correct in you know, you didn't just lie, but man, how you skewed the reality there. And so it's in a scary time when we're really not a lot of people are not concerned about conveying truth today, as you would say, well, they have to do that, otherwise well, we're not really worried about conveying truth.
I think the biggest final thoughts, or the biggest scandal to me is not so much that governments lie, because that's just what they do. I mean, all governments lie, it's propaganda, all of it. The biggest scandal is that the media goes along with it, because they're not supposed to. The journalists are supposed to be the ones who fact check the government. They challenge the government. They're supposed to, speak truth to power. And you have too many media out there who are colluding with this propaganda from the government.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, very, very disturbing. Well, obviously, you know, this has been a good discussion today, and we've been talking about censorship. But again, you know, Church Militant, real victim of censorship in all kinds of ways. You know, actually, you know, all the way from like actual government got involved and said you can't have your rally. Which, lest we forget, our rally in Baltimore was not some anti-government rally. This wasn't some rally to, you know, promote, you know, a particular position on COVID or anything like that. The rally was to say, hey, there's this group of individuals, the Catholic bishops, who have been covering up sex abuse. They've been covering up this terrible thing, and we want to hold them accountable. Something that, let's not forget, I think everyone, including the government, you know, is totally against. They are against this notion of covering this up. Everyone is rightly aghast and up in arms that this thing actually happened. And of course, we got cancelled from trying to actually have a rally to call these people to account. Very, very distressing. But obviously, we've been victims of all of this kind of cancel culture and these kind of things. So yeah, what people need to do is obviously come directly to our website, sign up for our emails, and do get our app. Everyone is living on their phone these days, so it's all good. Anyway, thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now, please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus exules filii Eve. A te suspiramus gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte. Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui.
Nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, may God bless you.